You ever wonder if there's like a detailed roadmap for the future hidden away in ancient texts? Well, according to some of the world's most studied prophecies, there is. Today, we're going to walk through that very timeline, step by step, to understand one of the most intricate forecasts for the end of the world as we know it.
So, the big question that our source materials really dive into is this one. Does the Bible actually lay out a specific sequential map of future world events? And according to a huge body of theological interpretation, the answer is a pretty resounding yes.
Okay, so for this explainer, we're going to step right into that framework. Our goal here isn't to prove or disprove anything, but simply to explain the narrative as it's laid out in these sources, piece by piece, so we can all understand this prophetic roadmap of what they call the end times.
So, where does a roadmap like this even begin? Well, the sources we've looked at say it doesn't just start with a bang. Instead, it begins with a series of global trends, things that are interpreted as a kind of prelude to the main events. These are called the signs of the times.
Now, this is really interesting. The sources often point to this specific quote. They explain these signs not as the end itself, but as birth pains. It's a really powerful metaphor, right? It suggests not an end, but a beginning that's leading up to a huge climactic event. And what exactly are these signs? Well, the sources point to a unique coming together of trends they believe are happening right now. Things like unprecedented global travel and this explosion of knowledge, the internet. Then there are the increasingly chaotic weather patterns, global pandemics, and the rise of digital currency and tracking, which many see as building the infrastructure for a future one-world economy. And of course, the big one, the creation of weapons that for the very first time in human history could actually destroy everything. So the crucial point here is the pattern. It's not that crazy weather or wars have never happened before. The idea is that, just like those birth pains, they're happening closer and closer together and with way more intensity. All of it signaling that the main event is getting near.
And what is that main event? It's a period of global chaos that is frankly unparalleled. This whole escalation leads directly into what the sources call the 7-year tribulation. So, what is the tribulation? Well, the materials we're looking at define it as this very distinct 7-year period, and it officially kicks off when a super charismatic global leader, who the texts call the Antichrist, brokers some kind of huge international covenant or treaty, most likely one involving Israel. This timeline is laid out with incredible precision. It's a 7-year countdown, but the absolute critical moment is right in the middle. At that 3.5-year mark, this leader breaks the covenant. It's an event the biblical texts call the abomination of desolation, a term that actually comes from the book of Daniel. And when that happens, the global crisis just escalates dramatically. And you can see here how the chaos is structured. It's not just random. The book of Revelation describes it as 3 back-to-back series of judgments, and each one gets more severe than the last. It all kicks off with the opening of 7 seals. And the first 4 of those seals unleash what are, probably the most iconic figures in all of prophecy, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Each one represents a different, terrible aspect of the coming global turmoil. Okay, so the first horseman comes riding a white horse. The interpretations in our source material see this as the rise of the Antichrist. He starts his reign with conquest, presenting himself as this amazing peacemaker, but his real agenda is total domination. Right after him, a rider on a fiery red horse appears, and he's given the power to literally take peace from the earth. This, as you can guess, represents the outbreak of global war on a scale humanity has just never seen before. Then comes the third horseman, this one on a black horse, holding a pair of scales. This is all about severe famine and total economic collapse, a time when a whole day's wage, a denarius, can only buy enough wheat for one person for one day. Just think about that. And finally, the pale horse. Its rider is actually named Death, and he's given authority to kill a quarter of the world's population through this devastating combo of the first 3 horsemen: war, famine, and disease. Now, somewhere inside this period of absolute chaos, the sources point to a very, very specific geopolitical conflict that was prophesied thousands of years ago in the book of Ezekiel. And what's so fascinating here is how these ancient names get interpreted for a modern endgame scenario. The sources identify Magog and Rosh with modern-day Russia, Persia is pretty clearly Iran, and then you have other nations like Turkey, Sudan, and Libya.
and they all form this great northern coalition that will try to invade Israel. So all of this, the chaos, the judgments, this final invasion, it's all building toward what the sources describe as the ultimate climax of all of human history. The finale is said to unfold in 3 key stages. First, all the world's armies gather for one final rebellion at a place called Armageddon. Second, Christ is said to return to Earth in power, and he defeats these massive forces instantly. And third, that event kicks off a prophesied 1,000-year era of peace on Earth, which is known as the Millennium.
So, look, with all this dramatic and, let's be honest, pretty terrifying imagery, you have to ask yourself, what is the point of all this? Why lay it all out? Well, the sources are really clear that the purpose isn't to scare people. It's meant to inspire.
This quote from one of our main sources really gets to the heart of it all. The message behind all the prophecy is one of endurance, of focus. It's a call to live with conviction in a world that, according to this view, is just going to get progressively darker.
So if we zoom out for a second, past all the details of horsemen and battles and timelines, what's the core message here? What are we supposed to do with this kind of information?
And the big takeaway is meant to be a call to purpose, not panic. It's the belief that the future isn't random, that it's known and it's planned. The idea is that knowing the end of the story should motivate believers to focus on things that are eternal, not earthly anxieties, and to live lives of real purpose. So in the end, according to these sources, this map isn't just about knowing what's coming. It's a challenge. If you knew how the story ends, how would you live differently right now?